Hi, everyone. Apologies for the reflections in my glasses, but fortunately it's a small picture and we'll concentrate on the slides. It's a pleasure to introduce multimodality as part of the developmental series in CADSS. So let's start with our core readings, which are the chapter 14 in the handbook, Youth and Love, Embodied Actions and Organizational Activity, and the article from MacArthur, Getting Pain on the Table in Primary Care Physical Exams. These are both in your folder that you have access to. What do we aim to learn today? We want to understand the basis of multimodal analysis. We want to learn about the contribution of vocal and non-vocal modalities to the organization of turns and sequences. We want to learn about embodied conduct in relation to pain in medical consultation specifically. I hope you're interested. I hope it was like an appetizer already. So a bit of vocabulary here. So first of all, what is a general definition that we can use? This is offered in the chapter. How visual orientation, gesture, and other forms of bodily comportment inform the production of social action. That's what we are dealing with. And it's important, obviously, if this appears here, to understand that these forms of comportment, they can be subject to the same situated interactional and sequential analysis that underpins studies of language use and talk in conversation analysis. So we can use our knowledge that we have developed already, the same principles and gaze to study these problems. And the chapter deals with 4 areas. The contribution of multimodal resources to the interaction or construction of a turn and talk, turn taking and turn allocation, the expression of feelings and emotions, and also the ways in which the tools that technologies feature in collaborative action. So we will say something about each of those, but we will invert number 3 and number 4, because number 3, it's a good introduction to our specific paper, which will deal with pain. Okay. So a little bit more on vocabulary, because this kind of studies existed before, especially in psychology, and it was called nonverbal behavior and nonverbal communication, and was not most of the time interactional. And in contrast to like multimodal communication, using these words means that visible behavior is analytically separate from language, from speech or talk. So there's verbal and non-verbal. And this is, for example, visible in the common concept of body language. There's nothing wrong to have that before starting to study these things, but after this you can't use these words anymore, because there is an idea that there is language and then body language, and this is exactly what we are arguing against. Also, is it embodied or multimodal the same? It is, essentially, for our purposes. According to Youth and Love, embodied has the advantage of not sort of separating modalities amongst each other, but they're both good, they're both equally used, and there is a bit of a turf war there, because these approaches have been developed in different areas of these studies: anthropology, sociology, linguistics, and so now it's exploding, and everyone has their own words that they want to use, but those two are interchangeable. But importantly, I want to warn you about this, even though this is very preliminary yet, but I've seen now that multimodal or embodied are used as synonyms of nonverbal. So I've seen like sentences like, and then that was, I don't know, the glass of water was multimodally offered to the child, as in like with a gesture. And this is not a correct use because voice is a modality, paralinguistic features are a modality, sounds that are not used for words are modalities, is a modality. So these are all embodied resources. So you can't say multimodal to mean gestural or nonverbal, something like that. Okay, so we're clear, we feel, from possible misunderstandings or incorrect uses. What could be the challenges of this kind of studies? Well, can we find the same orderliness that we have shown to you that is present in turn taking, turn design, and sequences? So you don't normally have like separate gestural turn, it's not a separate language. So you can have an offer if I have a tray of champagne glasses and then I, get one closer to you, but normally it's not what we study. It's a sort of discrete actions that can be considered as turns. And also there is like a temptation because, we know the organization of language already in interaction, then we can attach, looking at gestures and body movements and other aspects as like attached to this, as accompanying talk. But this is reiterating the primacy of language, and we have many activities like the one on the right side, in which actually body and the material world structure the activity and the interaction. So language is accessory; it's not primary at all. And sport in general is like that, or making things together, or working in front of a screen and doing things that are available to each other. This is a study also that if you want to look it up, this is a blind professional Kleinberg and their coach. My sort of little thing here that I really want to share with you is that if you understand multimodality, you really understand phenomenology. So phenomenology is the cradle of both ethnomethodology and CA, as you know. And one strong point, especially in Merleau-Ponty's version, is that humans are not so much into their brain and their plans or what they want to do, but they're really attuned to others and the environment. And if you study interaction with the multimodal approach, you can actually witness that. So this moment-to-moment responsiveness of the speaker to the recipient and vice versa. In essence, we can want to call them participants because their behavior is simultaneous and influencing each other, even though from a sound point of view, maybe just one is using that modality, but all the other modalities are contributing to the flow of interaction at the same time. And also, like phenomenology recommends, you can include in your analysis the material world, the full ecology of human behavior. So this is definitely a step forward in your study, if that's what you're doing. And with the next example, I hope I can really show you that. This is probably our first topic of the 4 issues that we saw at the beginning. And I want to use the first example that was illustrated by Charles Godwin in 1979, mind you. So we have 2 couples. John and Beth are hosting this dinner with Dawn and Anne. So during this dinner, John starts announcing that he's quit smoking. So he says, I gave up smoking cigarettes. And Dawn goes, yeah. And John continues, I 1 week ago today, actually. What's going on here? So it's the analysis of gaze patterns that reveals what is going on here. And we know that John identifies initially Dawn as his initial recipient, then Beth, and finally Anne. So Godwin came up with this type of transcription that that in which the dots are the change in gaze, and when there is a bracket, that's where the speaker is looking at. So in this case, we see John looking at Dawn twice, and Dawn just saying, yeah, at the end of that announcement, and then John moving his gaze to Beth, his own wife, and then to Anne eventually. Now, if you, like me, have stopped smoking, you know that, yeah, it's not going to cut it, okay? You want more than that for having stopped smoking. So after this minimal acknowledgement, he moves his gaze to his wife, but his wife knows, right? And one of the rules of interaction is that you do not speak about something to a knowing recipient. You want to an unknowing recipient, but something that Beth, as a wife, John doesn't know is that it's been a week. So John moves to Beth and then says 1 week ago today. So that is transformed into news for Beth. So the turn evolves as the audience fluctuates. But then Beth is also busy eating, so she also is a non-gazing back recipient, which is not also how it should work for audience speaker engagement. And so he moves on to Anne, looking at Anne. And Anne catches this and starts moving her gaze from Beth that she was looking to John. I know this is complicated. And so what we have, and this is not a plan, but something that comes, and John would never be able to say what he's done, is that he adds on this actually, which makes the anniversary of Quitting Smoking a report that fits now the fact that he's looking at Anne, as you can see on the top here. And then there you go, you finally get a proper acknowledgement. Really, Anne says, and you quit for good? So you have to understand this were the end of the 70s, in which we were in full conduit metaphor. The speaker hatches a plan, codes into words, delivers it, and then on the other side of some impossible arc of time, the receiver decodes this and then understands, sort of, process it. But this is light years far from this. We see that the turn is actually constructed interaction depending on who's there and who's displaying, attending to John. Okay. So also, if you want to read about these discoveries, there is a wonderful interview of Candy Godwin about her late husband, Chuck, in this, following this link. It's called Being a Couple in Life and Work. So if you want to see more about this interaction and construction of eternal talk, you can see how in the chapter by Heath and Luff, it's explained with the use of in ophthalmology visit, in which the patient begins his turn just according to what the doctor is doing, and there is this monitoring of gaze, and patient completes the turn only when the doctor's gaze returns to him, and then goes on, adjust the types of gesturing to the bodily configuration. You can see how the doctor gets closer, and then the multimodally, the patient builds his turn with the more specific gestures, and then the doctor does attending to the complaint in an embodied way by getting closer, looking more attentively and then saying, oh yeah, as well. Okay, so plenty of ways to exercise this learning. Second area was multimodality in turn-taking and internal location. Just to say, like the authors say, that who speaks when is really at the core of institutional encounters. There is an example that we can use by Tanya Stivers that has discussed in many papers, in fact, who presents the problem in pediatric encounters. So how is participation arranged multimodally? Is the child involved, and how? How are they given speakership? Are they looking at them? Who's looking? And how's gaze involved, and the position of each participant's body and their body postures and so on. And this is consequential, as she shows. In the chapter instead, you find a very complicated description of the sophisticated practice of auctioneers allocating turns with hand gestures and words. Okay, so as we said, we go through the fourth point before returning to pain, and this is about technologies in action. And simply it means that we study how technologies, from basic tools like a glass to advanced digital system, inform the concerted production of social action. So in this case, these are pilots deciding what they're going to do with some form of artifact, and in fact surrounded by very complex artifacts. And in fact, this area of studies is also known with technologies as distributed cognition, because the idea is that the cognition is not in the head, in the skull, but it's like spread over a number of things, objects, technological system, and the environment. Think about a city landscape or a mountain, a path on a field, and things like that. So this is Hutchins, one of the first cognitive anthropologists to have this approach, to follow this approach, and in fact almost started, that describes a complex interaction of body and talk of each separate person, and the bodies of two different persons talk to a different person, and all this in interaction with the world, which puts everyone else and everything else in relationship. Okay. And inspiring title, Imagining the Cognitive Life of Things. This is, there are PDFs online everywhere of this paper if you're interested. Okay, moving on to expressing feelings and emotions, and our specific topic for today. What can we say? Assessment of pain is a problem, especially now that constant pain chronic pain is a problem, and it's growing. So there are scalar and qualitative questionnaires. By scalar, I mean 1 to 10, and qualitative are a list of adjectives or things like that, but they're not considered as reliable for diagnosis or evaluations from professionals, because it's like pain is subjective. These things mean different things to different people. My 4 is not your 4. And then, and this is the subjectivity problem, which is a very good topic on its own that we can discuss a bit if you want when we meet. But in CA studies, it is actually shown that displays of sensations and emotions are not like uncontrolled spillovers, but they are part of the interaction flow and are multimodally orchestrated. So words and all the other modalities. And it's important to understand that pain is not just, again, an individual sort of expressing whatever goes on inside them, but there is something at stake. And so, for example, pain and suffering can serve to legitimize seeking medical help. So by no means they are sort of independent from the situation. in a medical encounter. In the chapter, what you see is that the assessment of pain is carried out through haptic, meaning touch, vocal, verbal, and gaze resources. So this picture already tells you, there is touching and moving of the foot. There is the bodily configuration and the voice that is being uttered by the patient. And what is going on? So the doctor manipulates the foot and the patient goes, ah. And then the doctor says, is that so? And I do that. And she goes, uh-huh. And he's doing it all the time. And then he says, where do you feel it? And then she goes, yeah, ah. And then he continues to do that in the poses. And then the doctor says, and then asks, just stand up, miss, is that with you? So we see how many resources are involved here in drawing the foot and pushing the foot forward, and then gaze, because the patient pronounces this vocalization and then turns to the foot, greets her feet, but then she turns to the doctor, and then she turns to middle distance while the doctor keeps at it. So we also see that the pain cry emerges in reaction to the doctor's manipulation, but is also withheld when he continues on doing the same thing. So obviously it's not simply just something impossible to stop or not under the control of the patient. So as Ethan Love says very poignantly, is not to conceive the body as a medium of communication, as in the idea of body language, a meter of communication, but we are addressing the resources and the practice that inform production and intelligibility, mutual understanding of particular activities within certain circumstances, in the social interaction moments in which they arise. So what MacArthur's paper tells us is the story about, much more specifically, about the dilemma of patients who feel pain during an encounter, but they have not been asked a pain question. Why is it a dilemma? Because to put pain on the table, as she says, means that the doctor hasn't asked the question and therefore is not doing something that he should or she should be doing. So what's the solution, according to MacArthur? That the patient would produce an unsolicited pain informing, but he or she would produce it as motivated by a sudden pain sensation. And we'll see it in a moment, but just to say that we use the term pain displays for any manifestation of pain that is presented as just originating in the current sensation. So the idea that pain can be a spillover is something that is actively manipulated, or can be anyway. So what is, for example, an unsolicited pain display? Something like, oh, in reaction to a manipulation, like here. So the doc is palpating the patient's neck and she goes, oh. And then she says, it's just so sore right there. So we have first the unsolicited pain display and then what she calls a pain assertion. Interestingly though, and here comes also the multimodality, she continues with the creaky voice. The creaky voice is something like, like it's just so sore right there. So even the sentence, even if it's in words, in the delivery, there's also pain being still expressed through the words. What is the general point here? General point here is that regarding the problem we just saw, that there is a gradient, there is a continuum of ways in which you can display pain and solve the problem of how do I put pain on the table. And so at the top, so non-lexical pain display, there can be just a wince or a grimace, but also sound. And I will show you when we meet with another study that I'm involved in, that silent and non-silent pain displays are also different, could be further separated. So outcries are part of this, but then you have lexical pain displays like ow. So ow is conventional, although it's still a pain cry, but it's like, you know, it's more, as I say, conventional, symbolic. And then you have to turn initial pain displays so that they start a turn, and so they're seen as under control of the patient that uses them to start a conversation. And they are least strongly hearable as motivated by pain cessation in this position. So position counts as everything in conversation, as you know. And then you have bold pain informings like, oh, it hurts when you do something like that. And they're the most vulnerable to being heard as independent assertion of the relevance of pain to what the doctor is doing. And so putting pain on the table in quite a strong way. So 2 general points before we go to our summary that are valid for the whole multimodal approach. First, that we study multimodality not only to understand interaction better, but also to understand specific activity systems like we just saw, and specific tasks and business of participants in certain systems. Okay, and the other is that you may want to get your hands dirty if you concentrate on these parts and really sort of share in field work the participants' life world, engaging with them in their activity settings. Okay, so this is something that, you know, you're a bit less in your ivory tower. Summary. What did we just say? That multimodality is fully part of CA mission to understand interaction from the beginning. It's just that now it's a lot easier because of the technology we have at our disposal. We said that embodied resources are involved in the joint production of turns at talk and also in turn taking and turn allocation. We said that the analysis must include the engagement with the material world of objects, technology, and material setting in general. Finally, we said that pain is made mutually intelligible in medical interaction through the finely organized use of embodied resources in combination with turn-taking organization, like, for example, in turn initial pain displays or turn disrupting pain displays. So I leave you with, as usual, with 2 questions. Why do we need a multimodal or embodied analysis to understand what is going on in a social situation? And what are the consequences of expressing pain in different ways in medical encounters, and notably of using non-lexical versus lexical resources? Okay, I really look forward to discuss all this with you next week. Stop recording.